Okay, we are live for our woman to woman podcast. I'm going to give everybody a chance to come in. Go ahead and share with your families and friends. Share with somebody who you know needs to be a part of this live. Know they need information about domestic violence. Today's conversation will be a little bit different because today we're going to be talking to a counselor, LaToya Pierce, and she's going to be giving us some wisdom, some information. We're going to be asking questions about navigating through domestic violence. So please come on in and make sure you share. I'm going to share with some people and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Hold on one moment. Share. We are sharing with family and friends. And many of you know, but I am your host, Tiana Marshall. I am the founder of Tiana's Tea and She Rises Academy. If you don't know about She Rises Academy, it is our school for women, helping women to understand their God-given identity and their God-given purpose. It is free. Later on, the link will be up so you can join the school. We are on a break right now, but we will soon be back in session, and we are having an amazing time in She Rises Academy. Also, if you are not aware, we have October the 17th coming up, our day of intercession. It is when we spend 12 hours before God praying and interceding, and this time the assignment is women. We're going to be praying on behalf of women all across the country and around the world, praying that these women come out of the situations that they're in, praying for abundance, praying for prosperity, praying for freedom for women. So that will be October the 17th, and it will be right here in Tampa, and I will share that a little later with you as well. But you know enough about me. I want to go ahead and introduce our amazing guest, Miss LaToya Pierce. I'm going to have her go ahead and introduce herself and tell us a little bit about you. Good evening. Can you go ahead and tell us your name and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is LaToya Pierce, and I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm part of many different organizations, so a lot of you probably already see my face everywhere. So basically, my nonprofit is called Going Into Pieces Movement, where basically we kind of started with men, and then we moved on up to programs with human trafficking, and we're a trauma informed based here in Tampa, Florida, where we just deal with healing, empowerment in the youth, and we support survivors, youth, men, families, individuals, navigating through trauma, domestic violence, mental health challenges, and life transitions. And so just a little bit, small about myself. Like I said, I am a serial entrepreneur, so I do life coaching, do ink fingerprinting, and I'm part of so many other boards. So yeah, that's about me.
Okay, it is so nice to have you on tonight. Tonight is a little different. Like I said, it's going to be before the previous, I think this is our fifth session. Previously, we were talking to women who had survived domestic violence. Tonight, we're going to be talking to someone who helped women and men navigate through the trauma that they have experienced in these type of environments. So the first question I want to ask you is, what brought you into mental health advocacy? How did you start doing this?
So I started doing mental health advocacy because one, myself as a child, there was a lot of different things. Again, we didn't term it, but that I felt that could have been considered mental. And then as I started looking at a lot of things at a young age, I knew I was either going to be in counseling, I knew I was going to either be in criminal justice or something, because people always trusted me. I could know them within 15 seconds, and I know like their whole life story. And so they would tell me like things, as they were young about, them being raped or, and again, this is from elementary to middle school to high school. Like I knew about friends being raped. I knew about, resource officers bothering kids, like a lot of stuff. And I'm like, and they were mentally torn. Like they started cutting themselves and doing, all kind of stuff that would be considered mental. And so again, even talking to males, like some of them were telling me like at a young age that babysitters and things like that was doing stuff. And I just felt like it was a need to do something mental. And then when I went to college, my two bachelors that I had was one was in criminal justice and one was in psychology. And I didn't want to like do something out of what I was already doing. So then I took it onto my master's and I did public administration. And then I started being a case manager. And then doing those as being a case manager, I seen a lot of things that was like a mental challenge that these, people, and then I also worked at a detention center, and all these kids like needed a lot of help and support.
Mhm.
And we was determined, especially us as African Americans, we don't term things as mental health. We like, girl, go pray about it. You good. And I love the Lord. I love him. But we need some help too
We love
sometimes.
the
So,
Lord. Yes.
and
Yes, yes,
so that's
yes.
kind of like what started my journey there.
Okay, very good. Because yes, I am definitely a girly who loves Jesus and believe in therapy too. And so a lot of times we tell people to go pray about things, but prayer, and definitely prayer works, and prayer should be the first thing that we do. But also we need to have practical solutions. Sometimes we need somebody to help us dig into the depths of our trauma to help us overcome it. Now you work with victims and survivors of domestic violence. What are some of the emotional and psychological effects abuse have on people that we don't understand?
Um, so I would say that some of the psychological things that affects that we don't understand is that a lot of times we don't understand grief, like the grieving process. And a lot of people
Mm.
tell them they try to rush the healing process,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and they don't know what domestic violence is, so they immediately tell somebody to leave,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
they don't know like the story behind it and how they go about all of that. So I feel like the emotional side of it, and people just in general, they don't understand even what they're even going through. So sometimes
mm-hmm.
somebody don't even realize that they have domestic violence. And so we as the people who are dealing with the person with that don't understand because everybody's story is different. And then
Mm-hmm.
people in the world don't understand because some of them don't know what domestic violence is themselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you said something that's very important. You said something about grieving, and many times, I mean, we don't understand, we tend to not understand that even, relationships that may not make sense to you, when you have to end that relationship that you've become so comfortable in and so functional in, that there is still a grieving process. And because people don't understand that, we tend to mishandle people who are in domestic violence situation, which is very sad, because I feel like instead of creating a safe place, mishandling people that are in domestic violence creates more of a dangerous place for them, even more so than the physical, because sometimes it's easier to stay within the situation than to have to face the brutal comments and conversations that people who are ill formed have about people in domestic violence situations. And one of the things that we hear most common is, why didn't she just leave? When you hear people say, why didn't she just leave? Like, from you working with victims and survivors, why is leaving often much more complicated than people realize?
So I have two answers to that. So one, when I was a case manager, we used to say, love is the root of everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that was the beginning of it. But then when
Mm-hmm.
you think more into it, you leaving is really the most dangerous.
Uh-huh.
Is that survivors face with fear and financial. There's financial things that goes into play. There's isolation. There's threats and guilt why people don't
Mm-hmm.
leave, and manipulation. And leaving is not just a process. It's a process. It's not a moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I really feel like that's why leaving is complicated.
We talked earlier on one of the episodes. We talked with the psychologist, and she explained that leaving can be one of the most dangerous times for a victim because you don't know the mindset of the abuser, and many times the insecurity of an abuser would rather you would rather you stay versus leave. And at this point, they have nothing to lose when you threaten to leave. So it can be very dangerous during that time. And forgive me, but typically before we even start, I usually share a story of domestic violence that I've come across. And this one was right here in Tampa. And I want to show it really quick because this is what we're talking about. And I didn't hear about this story, but I didn't know anything about this. But I was scrolling through Facebook today and it came across my screen because the trial started for this young man today. And so I want to bring attention to this story. 22-year-old Elena Sims, a young mother who was approximately 5 months pregnant when she was found shot to death in Tampa on January the 30th, 2023. According to investigators, Elena was found near her vehicle in a New Tampa neighborhood. What makes this story even more devastating is she was there with her 18-month-old a son who was reportedly inside the vehicle and unharmed while his mother lay nearby. And the authorities arrested Billy Bennett Adams III, known as a rapper here in Tampa called Ace NH, who investigators say had been in a relationship with Elena and was believed to be the father of her unborn child. Adams had been charged with first-degree murder and killing an unborn child by injury to the mother, and he has pleaded not guilty on these allegations. What was interesting about this story is that when I was reading it, is that 3 days prior to him shooting this young woman, he was acquitted for murdering two people in a 2020 investigation where it happened at a music studio in Lutz. He shot and killed two people and claimed self-defense. 3 days later, he goes and shoot this young woman. And initially, he claimed that he had been at home all night. And then after investigators did more investigation, found his car in the area, looked at the ring camera and found his car had moved, and then found the 9mm rounds in his vehicle, he stated that he was there, but it was self-defense. So the same claim that had gotten him acquitted 3 days ago for murdering two people was the same claim he was now using as a defense for shooting and killing this young woman. And so here's my point in bringing up that he had a history. You know, we say at work, where there's smoke, there's a fire, right? Even if he got acquitted for murdering the two guys before this, 3 days before this, the fact that he was in a violent situation that led to him shooting two people should have probably been a red flag for this young woman that this may not be a decent human being. This may not be, someone that I want to be in a relationship. How often do you, as a counselor, deal with people in relationships with men and women who have a history of violence, yet they overlook that history of violence to still engage in this relationship? How often do you find that?
So I'll say it happens a lot. One of my recent ones, it was actually a guy telling me about a lady, but a lot of the times, the kind of say is like, kind of go back a little bit to childhood trauma sometimes. Mm-hmm. So people kind of attach like pain to love. So it's like, if he hit me or she hits me, that means she care about me. She love me, right? So back in the days, right, they'll say, oh, he broke my phone. Oh, grab me. He love me, doing all this stuff. Because I used to see girls do that all the time. Yeah. And then they were like, man, and then like I hear dudes say, I'm trying. I don't know how to talk slang that well, but I'm gonna try. But he like, man, dog, man, dog, she came over here. She went to spraying up my car, and talking like that because they excited about that adrenaline of they happy that their friend is doing this lady's doing this because she's showing attention to him. So it's like a lot of times in that situation it could have been like they showing signs, but it's like maybe they violent to that person, or maybe they violent because they showing that they care. um
Yeah.
and that's what I've encountered the most. Like there's other scenarios, but that's what I encountered the most. To where it's like I said, the guy that I was speaking to, he called me and was telling about his wife or whatever. And I didn't ask him why didn't he leave when he first seen it. I just said, okay, well, I always ask people like, well, what made you say? Because so we oftentimes people say, um why didn't you leave? But they don't ask like, why did you stay? Like, what's going on? Like, they try to get to the root of what's going on. And then they have kids together. And so when I asked him, he just was like, because I said, well, when did you start seeing the first sign? And he said, actually, when we were kids, because they're older now, they've been married for like 20 years. And he said, but I didn't really pay no mind to it. But as I started to grow, she wasn't growing. And I realized that was just her character, just who she was. And sometimes people just ignore it because it's just like a force of habit, or they try to turn a blind eye to it because they put it to something else versus to what it really is.
Yeah, that makes sense because what we've talked about is that unfortunately people don't know what love is. And I remember literally I had a friend in the same situation that you were describing, and literally it was like an honor that he was acting a fool about her, not realizing that this is not love, this is literal abuse. But because we don't understand what love is and what love really looks like, then what begins to happen is that we associate um, violent behavior and activity with love. And so, if he's acting erratic because he saw me talking to somebody, then he must care about me and he don't want me talking. He just want me all to himself, and those type of behaviors. But we have to recognize those behaviors as red flags. Like that's not love. You know, love allows you freedom. Love is secure in who love is and does not need to attack, does not need to force a thing. And so we have to realize that that's not love. Um, Now I want to ask you this question because mindsets like that keep us stuck in relationships for far too long, past the expiration date, and it leads into a dangerous place. How can prolonged abuse affect a person's identity, their confidence, decision making, and their ability to trust their own judgment? Because at some point, you stop relying on your own judgment, your own decision making capabilities. You lose yourself in the midst of the relationship because now your identity is firm in what this person is saying and who this person what this person is speaking over you. How does prolonged abuse affect those areas of your life?
Um, so I will say that abuse breaks down self-worth.
Uh-huh.
It also it does affect decision making ability, and then when someone controls you for so long, you forget about that you have choices, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's why I tell people, parents even now, when you have kids, give your kids, even though you're the boss of the kid, because that also helps with them making choices as they get into these relationships. Give them
Mm.
choices. Because another thing I did not mention, I'm also a substitute teacher, but I've been doing it for 8 years. And
Mm-hmm.
I always tell the kids, okay, well, what would it look like if you did this? Because
Mm-hmm.
although I may say, go do this, I'll ask, what would it look like if you do this? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
giving choice, and you're helping them come into their identity, and helping them come into, knowing that they even have a decision that they can even make. Like, wow, I get to make a decision on my own. So when you're talking to your kids, try to grow them up now so when they get into the relationship, they can try to help with that. But it also, goes there too. So it impacts a lot on your identity because, like I said, with the choices.
I love that. I love that that you're saying that we need to affirm our children by allowing them to make choices and decisions and seeing themselves in the choice and decision and seeing the consequences or the side effects of those choices and decisions. Because a lot of times, as parents, we want to make the choice, make the decision for the child, but it doesn't give them the opportunity to see what are the consequences, what are the side effects of those choices and decisions. And then as you get older and you find yourself in relationships like this, then now you're fumbling around choices and decisions that should be easy for you to make, but because you didn't grow up having to make these choices and decisions, you don't. And so, interestingly, earlier this week, I saw a post in a domestic violence group, and it asked the question, why does God punish women for making for choosing the wrong man, but he doesn't punish men for for abusing those women? And so my immediate thought was, okay, so at some point we have to take responsibility for our choices and decisions, right? God didn't choose that person, but also there are consequences to making bad choices. So God is not punishing you because you chose the wrong person. Sometimes it's a consequence for making the wrong decision. Now, God makes a way of escape. God gives us grace and mercy, but God is not punishing you by allowing you to be abused for making the wrong choice or making the wrong decision. And I think that goes back to like what we were just saying is that, especially now when we have so much reality TV, we have so many, reality games that really we don't understand that there are true consequences to bad decisions. It's almost like the world has created a place where bad decisions are celebrated, and the badder you are, the more we celebrate you. But the reality is that sometimes there are consequences to making bad choices and decisions, and we have to realize this. Now, I want to go back to something that you said because I think this was very profound. You said sometimes people learn to associate pain with love, as we were talking about. So if I grew up seeing dysfunction presented as love, I may not recognize dysfunction when it shows up in my own relationship. How much of what we tolerate in adulthood is connected to what we normalize in childhood?
Um, I'll say a lot of it, honestly.
Mm-hmm,
Because I feel that um when you're a child, like I said, one, you got the decision making part of it.
mm-hmm,
And then when you are in a relationship, you like basically when you're a child, you learn how to form relationships, right? Whether it's
mm-hmm,
with your cousin, your brother, your sister, whoever. And then when you're in school, so you get that social, emotional development stages. Some people homeschool their kids and then they don't never take them out. And then they see all these things that happen at home and
mm-hmm,
they don't have an outlet. So now if they're getting spankings, and I'm not saying don't spank your child because you're supposed to is to spoil the rod spare child. But it's the matter of which you're hitting them. How long do you hit them? Are you hitting them enough for the punishment that they did? Um,
mm-hmm,
and when you're doing that, sometimes they get angrier. And when they have relationships, if they don't see you get love properly, like it's a whole bunch of things. So like how I'm jumping around, it's like so many things combined because it's like I'm not seeing my mom or my dad being loved properly.
mm-hmm,
So or
mm-hmm,
my grandmother, I think they're being loved properly, but I'm not understanding like the dynamics of a relationship or how family is. So I'm associating that when I get into a relationship with, okay, well, at the table, we don't talk. So
mm-hmm,
I'm not,
mm-hmm.
how do I know when I get married, I'm supposed to talk to my husband, right?
Yeah,
How do I
yeah.
know that this is supposed to happen? Like you want to get, like back in the days, we only had like stuff like Family Matters or stuff like that to show us. But like in the actual homes, what is showing us how to have a relationship? What is showing us these things? So when a parent is getting abused and stuff like that, just like the same thing with serial killing, right? Some of them see their mom be a prostitute like Jeffrey Dahmer them and Ted Bundy. They seen them all be a prostitute. So now they're targeting blonde hair people. Now they're targeting males as this and that. So their abuse, they don't take my concept, right? Which is I always say, I don't want to be, they always say hurt people hurt people. So I want to be a hurt person heal someone
Yeah.
because I want to change the next generation from me to become
Yeah.
different. So all those childhood traumas that I faced when I have a kid, I don't want them to have the same thing. So like right now, I'm raising somebody else's child, don't have my own, but I'm responsible for his mental health. So when I'm talking to him, I'm like, hey, um, you know, I was angry as a kid. I don't want to just like snap and be like, oh, well, no, you can't talk. You can't talk. I
Mm-hmm.
listen because that is a part of it. So if I'm growing someone up after me, it's my responsibility to be responsible because I always tell him, I don't raise you for me. I raise you for the world.
That's good. That's good.
So it's a lot.
So, and I think what I'm hearing you saying is that we're learning relationships long before we're actually old enough to date. So we're learning what love looks like, what conflict looks like, what authority looks like, whether our voice matters, or whether we're even allowed to say no, and whether we believe we have choices. So by the time we enter adult relationships, we're not necessarily starting with a blank slate, right? We're making we're bringing an entire relationship from the blueprint of our childhood. And then that makes me wonder, when someone grows up in dysfunction, can dysfunction actually feel normal? In other words, could a healthy relationship initially feel uncomfortable simply because chaos is what they're familiar with? Because a lot of times, we look at people like we want, quote unquote, what we consider common sense. But to someone who grew up in dysfunction, what may be uncomfortable for you may have been comfortable for them. So what looks dysfunctional to you is now dysfunctional to them, is not dysfunctional to them. And that's why I say we have to be so careful when we're dealing with men and women who have been through traumatic experiences, because instead of creating a safe place, then what we end up doing is creating a place where they don't feel comfortable sharing with you because of your judgments and your opinions about what they're actually going through and what they're actually trying to navigate through. So is that true? Could a healthy relationship initially feel uncomfortable simply because chaos is what they're familiar with?
Yes, it actually can. I would definitely say that, especially like when I was in college, we had a class called social norms.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about basically that same concept that you said. And I just said, like, if you traveled across the country, you go somewhere, to them, it looks normal. Like them eating ketchup this way, and we here in the United States and we don't do this. We're unnormal. So to them, they're comfortable. To us, we're like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I ain't used to that, right? Like I went to Bali and they crunching stuff with their feet, and I'm like, what?
Right.
That is normal for us. But again, they comfortable with that because that's their lifestyle, and that's how kind of relationships are. It's like to them it seems unhealthy, but to them that's what they're used to. So it's that's how they cope.
Understand. And so I want to distinguish from teaching a child that they don't have bodily autonomy or a voice, because we're not saying every child who was disciplined becomes an abuser or accepts abuse. What we're talking about is patterns of fear, excessive control, violence, humiliation, not being allowed to express yourself, and what those things can teach a developing child about power and relationships. So I like what you were saying, is that like the child that you're raising, is you're teaching them that I'm not raising you for me. I'm raising you to face the world. And so I can't raise you with the same fears and the same patterns that unhealthy patterns that grew up with me. I have to allow you to, number one, create and make your own decisions and see the consequences of those, but also create a space and a safe place where maybe I didn't feel that growing up, so that you don't grow up with the same insecurities and the same sheltered voice that I may have. And I think that's so important, especially as it pertains to raising children. Now, what do some victims? Why do you think some victims? Because this is another thing that I'm sure, as a counselor, you've seen and you've dealt with. Why do you think some victims return to the abuse?
Um, so I feel like some of them return because survivors, I feel like they return due to fear.
Uh
Again,
huh.
like I said earlier, finance, children, hope, manipulation, trauma bonds.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma bonds make people like the abuser feel like the safest unsafe place.
Mm, that's good.
So
That's good.
that's some of the reasons that I would say.
I know that I in talking to people or women who have been in domestic violence situations before, and this goes back to our responsibility, I think, as a society and as a community, wherein we create safe places and spaces, resources, shelters, and places for women and men that are in abusive situations to be able to go. Because I know I've spoken to women who've gotten out of situations, but because they end up sleeping in their car, their children end up going into, the fast food restaurant to take a wash off and brush their teeth before they go to school, and to put their children in very precarious situations, they end up back in the abusive situation. And I also know where there are women who've gone to shelters, and the shelters are not as safe as we think they are. And so they feel very violated, they feel very uncomfortable in the shelters, and they end back up in abusive situations. So I think that that plays a role in our responsibility, as a society and a community, to be able to create places, safe places, because realistically, it's the reality of what we live in, right? There are men and women that are abused. There are children that are abused, and there have to be places, safe places, where they can go and find and have the opportunity to recuperate, process, restore, and then be introduced back into society where they can actually survive. Now, I want to talk a little bit. I want to get a little bit personal, because I know that when I talked to you, you had not gone through domestic abuse, but you know someone who has gone through domestic abuse. How close has domestic abuse hit you?
I know a lot of people that's been through domestic violence, but I'll say my mom, she had two different kind of abuse. So she had domestic violence along with rape, and
Mm,
and it wasn't from like one person. So
mm-hmm,
a lot of her abuse did not occur in front of me or my sister,
mm-hmm,
but in her life, which kind of like shaped me a little bit in my purpose and stuff. It just taught me, some resilience and compassion for other people, because I always feel like um, my mom, I always tell her that I don't necessarily call her a survivor, because she's still, I mean, I don't call her a thriver. I always say she's still trying to survive, because there's moments where, although she's out of the situation and she's not with the person, I look at her life and I say, Mom, I kind of feel that you need to, talk to someone, because me and my sister both took the path of psychology and
mm-hmm,
criminal justice in a sense. And I'm like, sometimes people don't feel safe talking to their kids. And she's like, I do feel
mm-hmm,
safe talking to your sister. And I'm like, Mom, you don't, because I want you, when, even though you go to church and you read the Bible and stuff like that, and this is kind of a little bit of twist of it, because I said, I want you to be this to the same place I'm gonna be when I die and my sister died, because my sister's the pastor's wife, and we know where we're going, and my mom knows too. But I feel like sometimes I'm like, forgiveness is
mm-hmm,
parts of it. And she said, well, I forgive them. I said, you can't forgive them, Mom, if you are still constantly talking about, and again, your healing process is your healing process. But
uh-huh,
have you
uh-huh,
took the real steps to get into it?
mm-hmm,
Because I've
mm-hmm,
talked to you, Lana's talked to you, and we've told you, like, she try to thrive, but then her brain goes back and replays certain instances in her brain, little
mm-hmm,
triggering things, replays it. So it hit me, because I don't want to see my mom hurting when she tries to stay say she's not. And but yeah, when I hear you screaming and praying and calling God and asking for, help and and stuff like that, because you do your best in this world. Like my mom does absolute the best. Like she tries to be the best person she can be.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
it's those moments where I feel like you jump into survivor instead, like you're constantly you're overly explaining yourself, which is a part of being abused because you feel like your voice wasn't heard back then and you want to show that you're not lying or telling, whatever about something. So you're going back and over, skipping into that pattern of what, and I said, I know it because I do it. Like when I was younger, I used to always have to explain myself over and over because, not saying that you abused me or anything, but like when I would get spanking and stuff, because I had ADHD, I was everywhere. And I felt like, okay, well, you got abused and maybe you popped me too hard. I don't know, something. And then now that you're older, it's like, I mean, now that I'm older, I'm looking at those patterns and I'm like, oh, maybe that was because this or that or whatever. So now that we're adult, it's like, Mom, I'm feeling the effects now because now I'm trying to bring you out of it, get you help. Because even when I went to your thing, Miss Tiana, when you had that Tiana's tea back over there at Carlitos, I told her she should have went to that on me. That's why I lit the candle for her. Because those type of things is affecting me now because you're a part of me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I love that. Now, let me ask you this because you said something so important. We measure survival by whether a person is still physically in an abusive situation, but you're saying someone can be years removed from the person who hurt them and still be surviving trauma, as with your mom. So, what does unresolved trauma look like years later? Like, what are some of the signs that somebody may be physically safe today, but still emotionally or psychologically still living what happened to them? And I know you had just explained that too, in the sense of what you're dealing with your mom. But I think that's important to understand, to recognize, like, what are some of those signs? Because many times I feel like, and especially dealing with women, right? Many times we take offense to the way women respond, the way women operate and act without actually realizing that this may be a person that has been traumatized and they're still living, although they're not physically in what traumatized them, still mentally, emotionally, psychologically, they are living with that. And this is why they may be withdrawn. This is why they may be so defensive. And so we don't know how not to take those things personal. So I think it's worth discussing, like, what are some of the indicators that a person, you're dealing with a person who's been traumatized, and though they may not physically look like it because they're not still in the situation emotionally, mentally, they're still in that situation. And I think that you named a few things, kind of like your mom constantly like trying to prove herself, constantly repeating herself. But what are some of the other signs that you find when talking to victims that show that they are actually still living mentally in that space?
I see a lot of times they will, something is triggering, so they'll watch something on TV, and now their whole mood changed and they're upset, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll say, "I'm okay, I'm fine,"
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're not fine, because if you were fine, that little thing that happened, right? Like somebody can watch Tina Turner, What Love Got to Do with it, and they all
Mm-hmm.
upset again, and to this day they don't like, nobody don't like Ike.
So don't.
Look
We
at you.
do not. We don't think we'll ever like Ike. I can't even come back and defend himself. We don't like Ike.
This man done played in so many movies and y'all still don't like Ike. But the real character that played him, y'all don't like him. The real person who did it, he is not here. But so it's when they have, some of them have children, and the anger comes out to the children. So the children are trying to explain themselves, and they feel like, um let's say they'll hit the child, and the child trying to say, I didn't do this, and
Mm-hmm.
it's still coming back out in their lashes of how they're hitting them, because they're thinking with their brain and not like in that moment. And some people say, well, I blacked out. excuse me, that blackout moment is them possibly going back into their. I've seen where um I've seen some people not want to go somewhere that person have taken them before.
So
There's yes. So then I've seen where there's immediate, like some people honestly, which is bad, but some of them still want they're trying to find their get back, or they have relationship issues in their new relationships. Even when they're married, they have those relationship issues to where they're not fully thriving in that relationship because they're saying the same thing that this other person hurt them, that may be a resemblance of it, but they're like, you know what, no, this person did this to me. Okay, but I'm not him or I'm not her. I'm not doing the same exact thing that they did. Like maybe it's the resemblance, but let's talk about it so I can know how do I need to change for you. I always tell people to teach, you got to teach people how to love you sometimes. And if you're not telling your partner that or trying to heal before you get into this relationship, and you don't jump in a relationship thinking that you over this one, so you're just piling hurt on top of hurt and abuse on top of abuse. So this person yell at you and not meaning to yell at you, but now it triggered you. So now you want to break up with them. So you're easy to let things go because you don't want to deal with it, because now you have a choice. I don't want to deal with it no more. Instead of saying, you know what, this person didn't hurt me. Let me find out what he or she has to say about it. There's a lot of different things I've seen.
I want to list a couple of things because I think this is a good place to insert. I guess CDC says like 1 in 3 statistics combine that women have been sexually abused, physically abused, or stalked by an intimate partner. And I think that's important because as we talked about different ways to be able to determine whether or not the woman that you're dealing with has actually been in an abusive situation, I think that's important when we're dealing with each other. So I want to list a couple of those things. Over explaining herself. When you find a woman or man over explaining themselves, like we just said, feeling like they need to prove that they're telling the truth or justify every decision. Hyper vigilant, right? Constantly watching people's moves, their facial expressions, tone of voice, or body language for signs of danger. People pleasing is a huge one. When you find people, we oftentimes talk about people who, oh, they always trying to please people, but you don't know the trauma that woman's gone through. You don't know the extent that she had to go through to try to make her partner happy so that she can avoid being abused. So people pleasing, having a hard time saying no, feeling guilty after setting boundaries, people who constantly apologize. That is something that we run into a lot. Women and men who are always apologizing, and you're like, what you're apologizing for? But I think when we understand some of these side effects, we'll be more compassionate to people, apologizing even when they haven't done anything wrong. Always second guessing, their decisions, needing someone else to confirm that they're making the right decision. And you talked about that earlier. One of the ways that we can help in that is helping children, allowing children to help make decisions themselves, and see those consequences so that they're not always having to need someone else's approval for the decisions that they make. I think emotional numbness and withdrawing, always expecting something bad to happen, especially people who are pessimistic, because a lot of times people become pessimistic because this is what they're used to. People say stuff like, oh, when it rains, it pours, because this is what they're used to, and when you are given the opportunity to engage, this person, then you should be something different to them. You should be able to show them something different. And I like what you were saying is because watching your mother go through certain things, it helped you gain a compassion and an empathy towards other survivors. I think that is something that we need so desperately. But I also looked at like in engaging in a relationship. What does that look like, engaging in a relationship with people who are still in trauma? And a simple question can turn into an interrogation, right? Where did you go? May immediately produce defensiveness, over explaining, or anxiety. Constructive criticism feels like rejection or an attack. Instead of hearing there's something we need to work on, they hear you're not good enough. Someone needing space feels like abandonment. A person saying, I need a little time to think, can trigger panic or fear that a relationship is ending. Um, raised voices produce disproportionate physical response. So her heart may race, she may tremble, become overwhelmed, or mentally check out. I saw a video earlier this week of a woman who had been traumatized from an abusive situation, and it literally looked like she was having a seizure. It literally looked like she was having a seizure, and this was a physical response from a traumatic domestic violence relationship that she had been in. So I think that, there's so many things that we have to look at when it comes to, engaging men and women who have been through traumatic situations. Now, we talk a lot about women, but you deal a lot with men, right? You
Yes,
started
ma'am.
out with men's mental health. Of the men that you have dealt with, how different does a man being abused, how different does it look versus a woman that's been abused? Are the signs different?
Um, yes, the signs are different. And it's really because it's stigmatized that men are not supposed to have these feelings or that these things are not happening to them. And
Mm-hmm.
so they don't, it's unreported. Then there's because, a lot of people say that men shouldn't have it, or that how are they supposed to be this masculine person, or how do they have these abuse situations going on. One,
Mm-hmm.
we have the people that are by, or the alphabet. I don't want to be offend
Mm-hmm.
anybody. So we have that. Then we have the ones, like one of the ones that I dealt with. He was married to a woman, and um, he wasn't allowed in the house. She didn't open the door, and he took the police there plenty of times. And um, address might be different on the thing, his license, so he couldn't get in the house, and he moved to a different county, and all these things happen. And their emotional side, they don't show a lot. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, good thing some of them feel safe with me enough to tell me some of the things, but they wouldn't dare tell their homeboys, like, hey, this girl really, like, she slapped me, man. Or they
Mm-hmm.
say it and they friends laugh and be like, man, bro, you serious? Like, ain't nobody hit you, man. And they take it as a joke. So now they shut down. They don't want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it. Um, and so when I've talked to them about it, it's like, um, I was like a safety net for them, and I'm like, dude, we supposed to be in a life coaching situation, and I'm counselor, so I take that hat off and go to another hat because they need somebody to talk to. So I had to change the station based off what's needed, and I'm like, okay, and it's very sad
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of them feel like, man, she took my whole paycheck. I don't have a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
um, because women take the men's money, or she only told me I could only have $50, or I got to walk to work. Instead of, and she takes the car because I'm supposed to be the man, and I got to be the man of the house, so I need to get to work. But she's home eating cake or whatever, and I'm here walking to work every day, bringing her home the money, and then I'm not getting anything out of it. And then they say, well, thank God, like a few years ago, that the law was changed for the men to be able to have custody of their kids. But, oh, we got a baby, I'm gonna not let you see your baby because you not giving me this and that I want. So now this man got emotional because he wants to be a part of his child's life. So you have
Mm-hmm.
a couple of those things that men that are going through abuse deal with, where they hold the same thing as a woman, hold a child over their head, holding their money, their paychecks. Some of them even went far as when on some of the checks where you can deposit between your savings and your checkings or whatever. Sometimes some of the women have most of the check deposited to them, and the man get live off the other half or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot that they kind of deal with that. So I seen it look different,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time the same. It's just more known with females than males.
I think that's important because I think, like, when a woman says he hit me, generally we recognize that as something wrong, right? But when a man says she hit me, somebody might laugh, question his masculinity, ask why he didn't stop her, or assume he couldn't possibly be afraid of her, right? Do you think that stigma causes men to remain in abusive relationships longer or prevent them from seeking help?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely do.
When you work with male victims, I know you said, like, like financial control, sometimes threats involving the children. What are some of the other things? Because I think that women don't, honestly, I think that women may not even recognize that they're actually using forms of abuse, and what they're doing is abusive, because, women, we can get angry, right? We can throw things, we can break things. And I don't know if we understand that, men can look at that like, this woman crazy, so don't touch her, don't bother with her. But those are forms of abuse, right?
There's mental abuse. I've seen some stab their partner
Mm,
um, because they wanted to go out with their homeboy or play basketball or go to the gym, and now it's why you want to go to the gym? Who you finna go see? Who out there?
mm,
Um, I've seen where even making them late to work, not have a job, get fired from work because they feel like
wow.
they going to work to see some their boss or whatever.
Mhm,
Um, it's been like I told you with the car issue. One lady went as far as canceling her husband's insurance. um, it was it's sad because it's like, why do you want to have so much control like that?
mhm,
And
mhm,
it made him not be able to see his family. Like, I'm your wife, and in the Bible it says you're supposed to do this and that with your wife, and it's
mhm,
like, so you're isolating me. So that's another thing. You're the man not seeing the isolation either. Again, some of them had childhood trauma that they feeling like, well, I gotta do this by my wife because they use the Bible as manipulation. If you don't
mhm,
read the Bible correctly, you'll fall into that. Oh, maybe she right situation. And then you take your family and you take away your some of your safety nets because you feel that your partner is right for what they're saying. And then which is the same thing with females as well, but definitely with the males. And you're staying home watching movies that you don't want to watch because this is what they're saying. um Starvation, now she doesn't want to cook for you, she's mentally abusing you, and things like that.
mm. So I think we need to understand that domestic violence doesn't become less abusive because the victim is a man. And acknowledging male victims doesn't diminish what happens to women. It simply means we're creating room for every victim to safely say, this happened to me. And I think we have to be so careful with that, is that we don't create a world where we deny the fact that there are men that are in abusive situations. There are some women that are angry, and like you said, you've seen stabbing. I mean, I've seen stories where men have been murdered by women, and so we cannot deny that. And I don't want to make this like a I never wanted to make this like a women, women are the only one that are abused, because I know there are some men out there that are abused. Now, as you deal with survivors of domestic abuse, I want to ask you, I want to transition into what it looks like to support men and women who are in abusive situations. Because many times, we've talked about this earlier in some of our other segments. Many times, I think people don't know how to actually support um, survivors. What does that look like? What does healthy support look like for survivors?
Believe them,
Mm.
don't judge them, don't judge their timeline, offer safety and emotional support. And when I say this one, it's a question, but you got to be ready for it. So
Mhm.
when someone asks you, how can I support you? Instead of saying like, why didn't you leave? When you truly support someone, don't do like so most people do, like, I'm gonna pray for you, girl, and then leave it. That's your prayer right there.
Mhm.
Somebody will say, how can I support you? But they'll say that, or call me when you need something. And then when you call them, they're not answering. You don't have
Right.
nobody to talk to.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you have to be ready for it. So if you're gonna say, how can I help you? Or how can I support you? And let's say they do ask for that, you may not can't help them financially.
Mhm. Mhm.
Make sure you give them the proper resources that they need if you can't.
Mhm.
Immediately,
Mhm.
if you see some signs, because sometimes people don't know that they're victims, right? That's just like even when I do human trafficking. Some people don't know that they're victims. And some people
Hmm.
don't even like the word victim or survivor. So you got to make sure you're meeting people where they're at. When somebody's talking to you, don't hold your hand like this, because that is a sign of communication. If you open up the doors to ask them a question, make sure you, and of course, sometimes you really might be like worried about like, oh my God, that happened to you. You really might be concerned, but you doing this is blocking them from talking to you, because now they feel like, oh my gosh, she's judging me or he's judging me. They don't want to hear what I got to say. So as a community, be mindful, because just like a mute person, right? They only see your hands moving. They only do all this. So they say, and you showing them like you got hit, and you going, they thinking, oh no, talk, you don't want to talk, and they doing stuff like that because they think you don't want to hear them. So it's the same thing. If you're talking to somebody who can talk, don't hold your arm up for them, because that's passing judgment to them. Even if you in your heart you're not. Make
Hmm.
sure that you're ready to listen to what they say, because they may shut down and you might be the only thing they get to talk to before they're on the ledge.
That's so good. I think that's so powerful because, like, call me if you need anything, sound real good, right? But if you finally get the chance to call somebody, the courage to call somebody, and then they're unavailable, then what happens to that person is you reinforce the isolation. So I think, like, maybe before we even tell somebody, whatever you need, I'm here, call me if you need me, we need to ask ourselves, what are we actually capable of providing? When you tell somebody, girl, you need to leave, girl, you need to get out, do you actually have resources for them to go to when they get out? Are they coming to your house? How can you offer them some practical help? Because it's easy to say a lot of things, but in all honesty, if your friend calls you tonight and say, hey, I'm being abused and I think I'm going to leave, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? So I think that you brought up a good point in bringing up all the ways that we can support and the things that we should not do. But we really have to ask ourselves before we reach out to support is, what can I actually help my friend with? What can I actually do? And sometimes it might just be a listening ear. But before you tell them what to do, make sure that you're capable of helping them navigate through that process all the way. But now here's the other question, because I'm pretty sure that you're probably heard on the other end as well. Boundaries. Where do boundaries come from? Because now I know of people who have watched their friends go through domestic violence situations, and every time they leave and every time they go through something, that person is there. But the problem is that then, because that person keeps going back, it starts to encroach upon that person's relationship. And I know that, even I know someone who's even gone through domestic violence situation, and watching and being there for their friend, and every time the abuser would use that relationship in a form of abuse or manipulation by threatening to share information with the friend's husband about the friend. And so where do boundaries come in at? Like, at what point should a person say, okay, I've done everything I can do to help this person now? There's not a whole lot because I literally had to talk this person off the ledge, which is like, yeah, I'm cutting our communication with her because now her husband threatening to tell my husband this and that. And I'm like, but this may be a time that she needs you the most, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I'm thinking in my head, like, hey, this situation is encroaching upon this person's marriage. At what point does the supporter set boundaries and say, okay, yeah, you know, have you seen that situation, and what would you advise? Like, what kind of boundaries should people set?
So I'm gonna say I'm gonna use myself as one of them people, okay? Because I'm one of them people who feel like I can save the world, and I can't.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I will say that you yourself as a supporter has to know your boundaries and your limits.
Mhm.
And I had to tell myself, Toya, learn when to cast and when to carry, because God didn't tell you this is your assignment, because not everybody's your assignment. And that was one of the biggest things. And sometimes I still suffer with trying to make everybody my assignment. And I have to be like, all right, is this what I'm supposed to do? Like, can you give me a sign? Can you throw something at me? And I'm a big cloud reader, so I really like look at the cloud. I'm like, okay, well, I want to do this. But I'll say as a supporter, if you're a person who you got to know your capacity, because you can't take people's stuff with you, and you got to know like, oh, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
you got to tell yourself like, hey, I can't do this no more because some people are not ready to leave.
Yeah.
Sorry, just getting over this cold too.
I know you're getting over a
But
cold. I'm so glad you took the time to be with us because I know you're feeling sick.
but so some people, I had to learn like some people are not ready to leave. They don't
Yeah.
know, they don't recognize the signs or the symptoms. They're not ready. Now, if it's something that you feel that needs like some kind of intervention, like immediately, ASAP, call the police, do all those things, because you're not law enforcement. You're
Yeah.
not crisis center. Like even
Mhm.
with me, right? I used to be a crisis. That's why I get the crisis, the counselor part from where I was crisis intervention counselor, virtually
Mhm.
texting these people. And I couldn't make it over there. My supervisors who was online had to make it there. I can't go to every beck and call.
Yeah.
And yes, it's going to be hard for you because now I'm the person like I have to learn to say no when I want to say yes to some things, but within my boundary, my capacity, I can't take any more in when I'm
Yeah.
dealing with things of my own too. Because if I go rescue, let's say right now my son's at school and I come rushing to pick you up, and I was supposed to take him to the dentist. And I come pick you up, and then 10 minutes later, you're back at the house. I done missed this appointment that I can. It's hard to get in doctors now sometimes. So now I done missed this appointment because I'm trying to rush to your aid and rescue you. Or what if I have to take it with a grain of salt? Because what if, God forbid, hopefully this doesn't happen, but you get shot, and now I'm here trying to come pick you up, and I'm getting shot because I'm trying to be the saver girl. I
No,
have to
listen,
learn my capacity.
I have actually seen situations where actually I can recall two situations where the person, the friend who was trying to help the victim was actually murdered by the abuser because they were trying to intervene in a situation that was dangerous. And so I think that's so good because honestly, like we have to know what our boundaries are. And I think there's a difference between saying, when we're establishing boundaries, I can say I love you, I believe you, and I want you to be safe, but I cannot participate in a situation that's jeopardizing my marriage, my children, my safety, or my mental health. The boundary doesn't necessarily mean I don't care anymore. It just means that the kind of help you need has exceeded my capacity to be able to help you. And you said something that was so good. You have to know when to cast and when to carry. And so everybody, like you said, everybody is not your assignment. And there's some people you're gonna break your back trying to carry, right? You got to know how to cast those people onto God's care and not necessarily wash your hands of your friend or wash your hands of the situation, but know the extent of the help that you can extend to people, offer them resources, and there's also safe ways to do that because I know, that you can't always text a person, you can't always email a person because you don't know who's reading emails, you don't know who's reading texts or whatever the case may be. But I'm telling you, if you have a friend or family or loved one in a situation, educate yourself on the situation so that you can become a vital help to them instead of feeling helpless as it pertains to actually assisting victims in this situation. Now, as we navigate towards ending, because this is such a good conversation and you're touching on so many um great points. What is the difference between surviving something and actually healing from it? Like you described your mom earlier on, you were talking about your mom and you said that she's still going through, so she's still surviving the situation. What is the difference between surviving it and actually healing from it?
So surviving is an instinct. It's reaction. It's protection. It looks like functioning whole, while being broken and shutting
Nice.
down and emotional living, fight, flight, and freeze, fawn, making
Hmm.
choices. basically the choice that they make is based off of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
carrying shame and feeling disconnected, and surviving is necessary for them, but it's not the end. Being whole, excuse me, is basically reclaiming yourself. It's intentional healing, it's restoration, it's wholeness, it's feel like you're rebuilding your trust, your identity, the choices you get to make again. Or if you even ever had choices at all, because like I said, back from kid to now, have you ever even had choices?
Mm-hmm.
Choosing peace, understanding your worth, breaking trauma patterns,
Mm-hmm.
reconnecting with your emotions, and creating, um, basically creating a life that reflects who you really are. You start
Mm-hmm.
to even know if you never knew who you were. Um, Basically it's starting to look whole again, like in places. Your pieces come together. It's not perfect, but it's your pieces. And
Mm-hmm.
it's coming, and it's powerful. And so one of the things, going to pieces, what we help with doing is moving people from broken to balance, from wounded to aware, surviving
Mm-hmm.
to restore, pieces to purpose, and trauma to transformation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
surviving, I guess for better lack of words, surviving keeps you alive, but wholeness lets you live.
That's so good. Oh God, that's so good. And I think that's so important to recognize because many times, um, women, men who've been in domestic violence situations can mistake surviving for healing. I think surviving, you still have tools and skills as in instincts as if you're in the situation and you're still fighting through the situation. But like you said, I think healing looks like a person who is now out of the situation and are not taking forward steps and progression to create a life that is completely different from the life that they had to survive. And many times we meet people in survival mode, but not healed. And we cannot mistake the two because there's such a difference. Now we call tonight's shows going into pieces, coming out whole. Um, how much does counseling, coaching, community, faith, and safe support systems look like in rebuilding after trauma?
Um, you said how do it look afterwards?
Yes, like how much does it play a role in rebuilding after trauma?
Um, it plays a lot of roles because, you definitely need community when trying to heal,
Mm-hmm.
because again, you've been isolated for so long that
Mm-hmm.
you need the right people by you, and to make sure you're thriving in the right direction, and
Mm-hmm.
people to listen to you, because sometimes one with your choices not being your own, at the time, when you hear people, but the community need to know like how to allow you to be open, so you have that free will. And so
Mm-hmm.
rebuilding, you got to remember while you're rebuilding too, as a survivor, that it's okay to fall and come back. Just like in business, right? You can rebuild, start over, do whatever you want to. It's yours. It's your blueprint. It's your layout. So it's very important that we all, we all want that life of fullness and wholeness, and we want to see somebody. We don't want to go to the news and see our friend on the news for being dead, or somebody doing something, or taking them to do something crazy with them, um, because of that, and then we think to ourselves like, we could have helped with that. Like that was something so simple.
Yeah.
She just literally wanted a phone number, or just wanted somebody to talk to her or text her to let her know that it's okay.
Mm.
So it really plays a lot in it.
To revisit something that you said earlier, you said what something that was very very key to me, and you said that surviving keeps you alive, but wholeness lets you live. That says, survival says, how do I make it through the day? And wholeness begins asking, who am I now? And I don't have to live every day preparing for a dangerous situation. And I love what you said about choices, because abuse can take away a person's sense of agency, right? Meaning that you don't have the right and the freedom to make your choices and decisions. So healing isn't simply getting away from the partner. It is a part of the healing and the discovery, or maybe discovering the first time that you actually have a voice. That's so good. If someone was watching tonight and said, I'm out, I'm safe, but I'm realizing I'm still living in survival mode, what would be the first three things you would encourage that person to do to begin to move towards wholeness?
You said they're out, they
Yeah, they
survived.
said I'm out, I'm safe, but I'm just realizing that I'm, because I think a lot of women are in survival mode and don't even realize they're in survival mode. But like night, with all the information that we've given tonight, someone's watching and saying, you know what? Dang, I'm still living in survival mode. What are the first three things you would tell them as they move out of survival mode?
One, okay, you recognize that it happened. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now where do you want to go from here? So
Mm-hmm.
you will question yourself, where do you want to go from here? Um, and if you don't know, just start small. Just say, what do I want to do in the next 2 weeks? Or what do I want to do
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow? Like
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah.
like, because some people don't even know what they want to do tonight.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to do? Where start slow. If you can't be big and go big and think bigger, I would definitely say pray first, because
Mm-hmm.
that's just
Mm-hmm.
me. But if you're not a believer, then I would say start with those steps. But for me, if you're a prayer, I'll say pray first.
Mm-hmm.
Ask God for the direction of your life and what did He see fit. And honestly, if you were a kid, what was that first thing that you said you want to be when you grow up? Do you still feel like you want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you don't, what does that map look like for you? Because you have that choice. And if you realize that you've just been surviving in that moment of where you are, don't feel because you're older that your life is over and you wasted time. If you want to go back to school, go back to school. If you want to go start picking up, like, because somebody made you not be a part of the church house or be a part of a community, go grab a community. Go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that has domestic violence. Tiana is one of them that has domestic violence, that you can join a community that has been in the same situation that you. It may not be the exact same one, but it deals with domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's many forms of domestic violence, so you can identify which one was yours, but you can talk about it in a group. Um, Maybe you want to start a business, start it. Um, if you feel like, what would thriving look like for you? Just
Mm-hmm.
start with small steps, because thriving for you might be just taking your kids to school where you used to couldn't take your kids to school because somebody told you that that wasn't okay.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the store and pick out you a shirt because you didn't have that choice. Somebody told you that that shirt was too tight or too big and you were looking this way or that way. Make small
Mm-hmm.
choices and then expand from there.
That's so good. That is so good, because I think we don't understand like the restrictions, the real restrictions that come with domestic violence. And so for some people, just learning how to make one small step can be the freedom that they have been looking for. So like LaToya said, I mean, you don't have to plan out your whole future today. Start planning out your next move, your next evening, your next day, your next moment, your next store decision, your next outfit decision. Those are steps towards healing and being whole, because those are things that you weren't able to do in your previous relationship. There's somebody watching us who has survived. She's exhausted from surviving. She's out of the relationship, but mentally she's still there. She's praying, but she's hurting. She's functioning, but she's not whole. I want you to forget about me for a moment and look directly in that camera and talk to her. What do you want her to know tonight? If she's looking right at you, what do you want her to know?
So you're thriving, and you're surviving, and you want to get out of it, and it's okay. That one little step It's okay for you. It's not your fault. You didn't place that person. You didn't tell that person to do that to you. You are allowed. I now give you permission because it is your choice to be able to think for yourself, to be able to do whatever you need for yourself. If I don't know you, but I love everybody. So
Mm.
I love that you're here tonight, that you want to change, that you want something more and you see something more for yourself. You guess what? You survived a whole hour and 15 minutes with us without nobody taking your phone away from you.
Mm.
That's a big step. Clap for yourself. Give yourself a hug. Give yourself permission. You are loved. You are needed. You are wanted. You are not those mean, nasty things that people have said to you or that
Mm.
person have said to you. You are a wonderful person. And don't let anybody define you or tell you who you are. The first step that you did was come here. The next step now, get outside, go outside and just breathe the fresh air.
Thank you so much. I hope that if you're watching and you heard that you believe and you receive everything that LaToya said, because it is true. Now, I want to tell people how they can connect to you, because you have so much to offer. You have so many things going on. I'm going to put your information up here, but tell us a little bit about going into Pieces Movement. Tell us about what you do, how people can connect. Talk to us a little bit about it.
So again, like I said, my organization is called Wholeness to Pieces Movement. And basically, I deal with human trafficking, financial literacy, teen fathers, mental health, domestic violence. I'm a life coach, notary, ink fingerprinter. And how you can connect with me is she put a couple of my things there so that you'll be able to reach out to me. My phone number is there as well. So I'm going to be the one to say, if you need me, I am a person that will, most of the time, I email just like I text. So if you email me, I will get back to you or I will text you. Um, a lot of the things that are like one of the things that I actually do right now, I teach teens at Fair Oaks Park. So if you wanted to involve your teen in there, I teach them human trafficking, financial literacy, and also I teach them about domestic violence as well, because a lot of teens they're starting to date and stuff like that. So we kind of talk about those things in there. Um, and I have several programs that I have, which is suicide, mental health, the Teen Father program, and the regular program. And then we just are adding within there the domestic violence, because a lot of people we see suffer from that. So those are some of the things that I do.
Wonderful. So I have dropped LaToya's information in the comments, as well as you can go back in and different points you'll be able to go back in and grab her information. But I want you to understand this. You may have gone into pieces, but pieces don't have to be your final condition. Survival kept you alive, but healing teaches you how to live again. And those pieces, with time, intentional work, safe community, appropriate help, faith, and grace, can become a part of a life that is restored, purposeful, and whole. I pray that tonight's live, that you receive the information that was given, that you understand that you are loved, that you are valuable, that you are purposeful, that God did not change his mind. Your situation did not change God's mind about your situation, that there is help, there is hope, that there is healing for you, and there are resources available to you. I, along with LaToya, will say that I am available if you need me. My information is always here and available. But please, please, please don't stay in a situation that you don't have to, because we are available. Resources are available. People are available out there to help you. Listen, I thank you for joining tonight. Next week, next Tuesday, we will be back again with another survival story. Until then, we love you, we appreciate you, and we're so grateful for you joining us on our Woman to Woman podcast. Good night. Thank you, LaToya.
You're welcome.
Bye bye.